gentlemen. John, this was great. I won't be able to top your insights, I'm afraid, but what I can do is to talk a little bit about possible scenarios. What could actually happen? How do economists think about that? At the Ifo Institute, we also did a study on Brexit. Of course, everyone who wants to be serious in this business has a study on Brexit. We were amongst the first in February last year when Brexit was a big issue in the elections. Now, so I think we need to distinguish short run from long run effects that something like a Brexit could have. In the short run, we're already seeing this now, is that the uncertainty that Brexit creates is huge. In a sense, the only thing we are sure about as economists is that the Brexit will create a long period of uncertainty, and that this large amount of uncertainty will have negative effects on investment, on economic behavior of all sorts, driving Britain probably quickly after the Brexit into maybe not a full-fledged recession, but into certainly much smaller growth rates. And that then will fire back on Germany, in particular also on Bavaria. Bavaria's second largest export market is the UK. Growth rates over the last years have been spectacular, also because of the exchange rate effects and other influences. But England is very important, and here being at the BMW Foundation, BMW is a very nice example of how German industry has exposed itself to this very attractive market, the second largest market in Europe, and a very finely calibrated supply chain links small businesses in Britain, small businesses in continental Europe under the umbrella of larger companies such as BMW. And so the short-run effects will be probably a recession. It will be also, and this will also be felt here. We already have seen reactions in the stock markets in the last couple of days, 10% or so in the German stock exchange, the FTSE similar. The interesting puzzle here is that knowing that the Brexit will happen, also looking at the polls, financial markets have been rather relaxed for quite long. So why is it that only in the last days traders have become nervous? That's something I don't have an answer for, but it's an interesting and puzzling observation. So in the long run, the uncertainty that dominates in the short run is of course about what can happen after the Brits tell us they want to leave. And there are a lot of scenarios galore. It all comes down to goodwill at the end, on political goodwill of leaders of the continent. How will Frau Merkel view this ex post? And we see a lot of tactical statements now, where leaders in Europe say, if they dare to vote for leave, we will really punish them, and it will be dire. That is of course tactical, and at the end, once the Brexit is there, there will be a lot of pressure by corporations, both in Britain but also in Germany and the other European countries, to kind of accommodate that shock. If you think about France has big public utility companies who are also very strongly invested in Britain. So transport, electricity, all this would become economically troubled, and so there will be a lot of pressure to accommodate things. Now, what do the Brexiteers want? In my view, three things, which John has already mentioned. A couple of them. The first is they want to control migration more. And there is, if you look at the data, one can understand that. The stock of immigrants has exploded in Britain. That is a fact. And the promise of curbing migration in 2015 to 100,000 has failed by a large margin. So there is this issue. The second is about regulation, red tape, bureaucracy, the feeling that Brussels overdoes things. I think in Bavaria we have very similar concerns in many quarters, both on immigration and on the bureaucratic things. And the third element, which is also not alien to the discussions we have here in Bavaria, is about the fiscal contribution to the EU budget. Here in Bavaria we also discuss the fiscal contribution that Bavaria does to the federal budget in Germany itself, and then certainly also on the European level. Now, what can happen? the first best or smoothest way to deal with the Brexit would be something that resembles the relationship that the European Union has with Norway, Iceland and Liechtenstein. So that would mean that Britain would still have to pay. Britain pays now something like 8 to 10 billion euros net into the EU budget. If we take Norway as an example, that would go down to something like 6 billion euros, so we'll still have to pay into the budget. They would have to accept immigration, but otherwise they would enjoy the advantages of the common market. However, they lose a say, so they would no longer be active in decision making. The second option would be the Swiss model. Switzerland is not in the EEA. It has 120 or so bilateral treaties with the European Union that are all then amalgamated together with this guillotine clause. So once you exit one of those treaties, all the rest is put into question as well. The problem with the Swiss model is that also the Swiss pay a little bit less than the Norwegians, so it's probably not 6 billion that they would have to pay, but 4 billion instead of 10 net into the EU budget. But the Swiss deal does not include the financial sector, which is core to the British economy. And as you remember, the Swiss just had a couple of months ago, or years ago now already, a referendum on mass migration. So the Swiss model does not undo the British problem of migration. Third option, forget all those European specialties, just do a plain vanilla free trade agreement with Europe. Like Europe is in the process of negotiating one with the United States, or there's another one with Canada, CETA, which is just in the process of ratification. Now, why would Germans, who fiercely oppose both CETA and TTIP, and my own country, Austria, it's even worse, why would they do a free trade agreement with Britain? No, I mean, maybe we would few Brits with less angst than the other countries, but that's not clear at all whether that would work. And also one other thing is, sure, those agreements, if you take CETA as an example, are much less comprehensive than everything else, so the EA model or the Swiss model. And for sure, what that would imply is that trade barriers, not so much in the tariff area, but in the non-tariff measures, so all these regulatory things, would over time arise and make trade with between Britain and Europe more expensive. And then the fourth option, which seems to be the one that the Brexiteers really want, is the only one that gives them control over immigration, frees them up totally from regulatory seal in Brussels, and stops them paying into the budget. That would be the fallback into the WTO, the World Trade Organization's structures, which would then mean that Europe would have to apply a tariff, the most favored nation tariff that we apply to all other WTO members with which we have no special arrangement, to Britain. For BMW, that would mean that the Mini produced in Britain would be subject to an import tax in Germany of 10%. Yeah? That's car tariffs right now. And you can go through the list, you find other products that we like to import from Britain, or that it could also be components that we import from Britain that would now all of a sudden be taxed. Now, Britain could, of course, there's some liberal people in Britain say, Britain could say, we unilaterally drop all our tariffs to zero, and that's certainly possible. Whether those who vote now for Brexit will be happy with this, because that is some sort of ultra-liberal globalization model. No, we give away everything without getting anything. Whether that's politically feasible, I doubt it. So in a sense, if you, I mean, what John said is very right. If you go through these options, nothing good will come out of that. In the short run, big uncertainty. In the long run, all these options don't look good. So the good question, and John started with the right question, was why the hell, you know, if this is so clear, why is there still so much willingness to leave the European Union? And I quite agree with what John said. Maybe two smaller comments on the magnitude. So you know, you can run models on all these things. They come up with big intervals, and Britain, of course, would lose much more than anyone else, except the Irish. So I have seen some simulation, including ourselves, under certain scenarios where the Irish are actually the big losers of this, because they depend on the British market more than they depend on the European market. And that's an issue. We don't know what will happen on the Irish islands once Brexit happens. And the second comment is about Scotland. So there sometimes the idea, is discussed that once if there's a Brexit, then the Scots would leave. That could well be, but certainly not for economic reasons. Because, of course, the by far largest export market for the Scottish is England. So there would, again, for the reasons that I've stressed before, there would be an economic reason why they should. They could have left before with England remaining in the European Union. Then the old wall that separated Roman Britain from the barbarians, that wall under the EU wouldn't have been a wall, but now, with one country out of the EU, would be a real friction. So I don't think that this, coscotics, or whatever you want to call it, would be implemented. What is rather more likely is that the stability of expectations, both in Britain and in Europe, that we have a common body of regulatory rules and so on, and that this is something that we can take granted for the future, that this anchoring of expectations would be damaged and persistently damaged. So if you can't just walk out and then get some arrangement and everything is possible, this idea of irreversibility in Europe and this idea of stable expectations to have a common market would disappear, and that would damage growth, investment, important aspects of economic activity. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much so far.